May 5th, 1945. Something happens today that is not something we've seen before in this war. Today, German and American soldiers fight together. Yep, alongside each other. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. The regular weekly episode came out just yesterday, May the 4th, and it's the longest of this whole series. And the event of today could be covered, I guess, in the next one, May 11th, but that's going to be pretty darn long too. And I didn't want to get the events of today lost in the shuffle either, since they're so bizarre. I meant what I said. Today, on May the 5th, German and American soldiers fight side by side. There's also a former French prime minister involved, and even a former chief of staff of the French army, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This is not actually the first time Americans and Germans fight alongside each other this war. The first time was last week on April 28th in Operation Cowboy, though that was less weird than the one today. That was fought in what the Germans call Risch-Lau in Czechoslovakia. See, after the Anschluss annexed Austria, the Lipizzaner breeding mares were moved by the Germans from Vienna to Risch-Lau. By late April, both the Soviets and the Western Allies were advancing on and in Czechoslovakia, and the veterinarians on the farm were afraid that if the Soviets reached them first, they'd kill the horses, since that's what they'd done in Hungary to the Royal Hungarian Lipizzaner horses. Walter Holters, an officer of the Luftwaffe General Staff, who was at the farm, made contact with the 42nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron of Charles Reed's 2nd Cavalry Group, the closest American unit in the area. This group is part of George Patton's U.S. Third Army, and they're known for daring operations. They are a mech unit, but many of the men are horsemen, and they immediately got to work planning a horse rescue operation. There were a couple of issues. For one, the German troops in the area would likely not agree to the Americans just advancing through them. It's like 30 kilometers through them to the farm, and there are thousands of German troops in that area, including what's left of the 11th Panzer Division. On top of that, many of the horses were pregnant or had just given birth. Well, Patton ordered a task force of 325 men created, commanded by Robert Andrews, with a couple light tanks and some howitzer motor carriages. An artillery barrage by 12th Corps suppressed the Germans enough to allow the Americans to cross the border and get to the farm. There were more horses than men, so in addition to some POWs they freed from local camps, Andrews armed the German soldiers at the farm, even though they were technically prisoners themselves. The rescue operation was attacked twice at the farm by men of the Waffen-SS, but they fought them off both times and inflicted more casualties than they took, so the SS withdrew. The horses were then either ridden or herded to freedom. I should say, though, that the Soviets did appear on the scene just as it was nearly all over, and they did not oppose the evacuation. But that was last week. What about today? It happens today down in Austria. There's a castle there called Schloss Itter that dates back to the 1200s. It was taken over by the SS in 1943 to use as a prison for high-profile prisoners. Former French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud is here, Charles de Gaulle's sister is here, former French Army Chief of Staff Maurice Gamelin is here, and more. Now, the war is closing in, and a lot of the last Deinhard, Wehrmacht, and SS men are also in the area by now. The VIPs, very important prisoners, are worried. They are worried that their SS guards will execute them instead of releasing them to the Allies. Yesterday on the 4th, though, the SS officer in charge of the castle vacated the premises, and the guards also. So Reynaud and Michel Clemenceau, the son of former Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau, leave the castle and walk into the village of Itter. But they head back pretty quickly. See, okay, there's an Austrian resistance, right? Mostly, they've only been able to offer passive and non-violent opposition. But with the Allies now just a few miles away, they can act. They've given them intelligence about the German defenses, they've directed army spearheads through the Inn River Valley, but their most important goal just now is protecting Austrian civilians from reprisals by the SS. People have been hanging white flags and Austrian flags out from their windows, and the SS does not hesitate to open fire on these defeatists. Reynaud and Clemenceau find the village full of SS patrols and machine gun posts, so they go back to the castle. They want to do something before the SS down in town remembers about them, so they plan to get in touch with an extremely unlikely member of the Austrian resistance. SS Captain Kurt Siegfried Schrader looks like the stereotypical Nazi bad guy, right? Highly decorated, he's even served as a bodyguard in Hitler's headquarters. After being badly wounded in fighting in France, though, he defected to the resistance. Schrader says he'll help, but his authority can only buy some time. If any higher-ups in the SS arrived to kill everyone in the castle, his rank would not prevent it. Only the arrival of the US Army would save their lives. They send out Andreas Krobot, the Czech cook, to establish contact, and he cycles to Wörgl. Now, either he is nearly caught by a patrol, but is pulled into a nearby house and saved, and his savior is German Army Major Josef Gangl, or he contacts the resistance and is taken to Gangl. It's hard to be sure. Sepp Gangl has been a soldier since joining the Reichswehr in 1928. He began fighting this war in September 1939 against the 1st French divisions across the German border. He fought with Army Group South in Ukraine during Operation Barbarossa. He fought in Normandy last June. He escaped the Falaise Pocket last August. He even fought in the Ardennes over Christmas, but has become disillusioned, and like Schrader, has chosen to betray his oath to the Nazis. I don't quite know how such decorated soldiers gained the trust of the resistance, but today, it matters little. Gangl and Krobot set out to find the Americans. They drive a few miles cross-country, then suddenly spot several Sherman tanks in a small village. Gangl hits the brakes and, wearing his German uniform, gets out of the car, hands in the air. He is taken to the nearest U.S. officer, Lieutenant John Lee. After listening to their story, Lee radios it into headquarters and asks permission to lead a rescue mission. What a mission, too, huh? Well, he is given the green light. His unit is part of the 12th Armored Division. But now, after Hitler's death, a lot of people are not quite as enthusiastic as Lee to risk their lives fighting die-hard Nazis in the final hours of the European war. Still, Lee sets off with an ad hoc task force of 7 Shermans, his own tank, Besotten Jenny, in the lead. At the next river, however, only 4 of his tanks are able to cross a wooden bridge before it gives way. The 4 continue. Upon arrival in Wörgl, they are warmly received by the Austrian resistance and joined by a group of German soldiers loyal to Gangl. The Waffen-SS have left Wörgl for the moment, but Lee leaves 2 of his tanks behind to support the resistance in case they come back. The 2 remaining Shermans, Besotten Jenny and Boschbuster, move on with the Germans in tow. Close to Itter village, they have to cross another bridge. Lee has Boschbuster stay here to guard their only way back. So, Besotten Jenny and around a dozen American and German soldiers arrive at the castle gates. The men go inside, and Lee orders Besotten Jenny to turn around to block the entrance. Then, in the castle, one of the most unlikely scenes of this war, or perhaps any other, takes place. An American Army officer, a German Waffen-SS officer, and a German Army officer together make a plan to defend French prime ministers and generals from loyal Nazis in a medieval Austrian castle. Schrader reports seeing several Waffen-SS trucks in the area carrying anti-tank guns. Lee, knowing that American reinforcements are eventually on their way, orders the French prisoners to seek shelter in the keep while the military guys take turns guarding the castle walls. They have only rifles and submachine guns, but the firepower of Besotten Jenny should, hopefully, give them a chance. Lee gets some sleep, but not for that long. At 4 a.m., he is awakened by the sound of gunfire. A German MG-42 is firing at the gatehouse, and Jenny is answering. Tracer rounds fly through the dark, and the men on the western wall spot SS men with grappling hooks. The SS is clearly looking for a way in, but Gangl, Schrader, and their castle krauts keep them at bay, firing from the upper floors while the Americans defend the gatehouse. Trust between the Germans and Americans was shaky at best earlier, but now none of them will survive if the SS gets in. Shortly after 8:30, things get heavy. They spot a couple truckloads of SS arriving northwest of the castle with a 20mm anti-aircraft cannon and an 88mm gun. The first 88 shell smashes into the castle and the whole thing shakes. Then 20mm shells begin blasting small holes through the walls. things go from bad to worse. Besotted Jenny rocks violently backwards with fire spurting from the engine access grill. Her crew jumps out of the burning tank just before a second anti-tank shell seals its fate. The French VIPs also take up arms and join the defenders at the gatehouse. Renaud, in his mid-60s, fires his MP40 through the open window. Gangl runs over to push him out of the way of the return fire. And the man who has seen the European war from beginning to end, Joseph Gangl, is killed by a sniper at its finish. But with more 88mm rounds smashing into the castle walls and beginning to break it apart, there is no time for mourning. When the radio is blown to pieces, Schrader sends Lee to the castle telephone. Reaching the resistance back in Virgil, Lee screams into the phone they are in need of immediate assistance or they'll soon be shelled to pieces. Another round explodes against the castle, and the line goes dead. Germans, Frenchmen, and Americans fight for their lives against the Waffen-SS, but ammunition is running low. With Gangl dead and several Wehrmacht soldiers wounded, they are close to being overrun. Lee pulls the defenders off the walls and deeper into the keep when he sees a squad of Waffen-SS close to the gatehouse. But just as they bring a Panzerfaust into position, a sudden rattle of heavy machine guns rips into them. The cavalry has arrived, and just in the nick of time, with the firepower of arriving American tanks, the battle takes a sudden and decisive turn. The remaining SS men quickly disperse into the woods, and the castle and its defenders are saved, and all of those French VIPs survive, thanks to one of the least likely alliances of the war. What has just happened? Gangl is the only defender to actually die in the battle, though others are wounded, as I said. Reading the future, he will be honored as an Austrian national hero, and there will be a street in Virgil named after him. Lee is promoted to captain for his work this day and receives the Distinguished Service Cross. There is a lot more that happens in the war today, May 5th, 1945. But for all of that, you will have to wait until the 11th for my regular weekly report. I thought, I'm out of breath. I thought this battle today deserves special mention because it very much illustrates an old adage that is obviously very, very true. War makes very strange bedfellows. Hey, if you want to see a turn from populism to fascism, how things like the SS come to be in the first place, click here for a Between Two Wars episode we did on our Time Ghost History channel about 1932. I cannot believe we did that 5 years ago. It is the Time Ghost Army that allows us to make all our content over these many years. So for even more, forevermore, join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. See you next time.